All right, guys, happy Friday. Welcome back. Concepts and Training. Going to be diving into the transverse plane. So we talked about kind of the sagittal frontal plane, side to side. Now transverse place, top and bottom. Right now, top and bottom. A lot of people are like, oh, like I did upper body, I did my bench press. Transverse plane. No, not that. Right? Trying to move in a manner that either creates force or resists force in a kind of this rotational pattern. So when we look at movement, right, we have kind of this rotation, or we have anti-rotation, not breaking, to a force trying to move us in a transverse manner. So I'm going to use a landmine presses, or a landmine kind of pull to punch, and a kind of a rapid punch here as an example. So if I have a landmine here, really what we're looking at when we're looking at transverse plane is being able to get force in this manner where we're redirecting it, right? So if I've got this landmine here and I push into the ground, rotate my hips, and push up, well, I've got a lot of things going on here, right? So I am moving in a manner where the force that starts initially might actually be a little bit more frontal plane, right? Because I'm almost pushing to get outside of my base of support, but I turn it into a sagittal movement here, right? So I'm creating this dissociation between my hips and what my feet are doing, right? And I can kind of notice my left foot is still pointed towards the camera here, but the rest of my body is moving towards this bar. So when we look at that transverse plane, being able to understand, well, I can move in this way where I start in a sagittal motion and end up in the frontal plane, or what was the frontal plane, right? There's our transverse plane. So I'm moving the hips, right? And I'm creating this motion where there's a dissociation with my upper and lower body, right? And like I said, that front leg, that toe is still pointed pretty close to the camera, right? And the hip is closing down. So all of a sudden I'm starting to get in this position where I've got this dissociation between my hips and my upper body, right? My lower half and my upper half might not be moving in the same direction. Now we can resist motion, and a lot of times people use this Palloff press, and we could really debate into whether or not this is a really great example of resisting transverse motion, or really how much it's got, in terms of benefit to core strength. Being able to move here, right? A lot of times people use this Palloff press because I'm resisting motion from that dissociation from hip and upper body. Now, I can also turn this into a more dynamic movement, right? If I were to sit here, just to kind of show you that dissociation between hip, rib cage, okay? If I were to move in this position, right? Well, hips stay forward and we're rotating through the trunk into this position, right? Just using that band rotation to be able to create that dissociation between hip and upper body. We're creating that movement, right? So there's our transverse plane, because all of a sudden we're cutting upper half, lower half, moving in a manner where that motion is kind of working in the surrounding area. So that's just kind of a brief overview. Obviously we use the landmine punch here and band with the Palloff press of the rotation, being able to understand the transverse plane, and that we're really looking at rotating or even resisting rotation, right? Especially if we get into like gait cycle mechanics. If I were to resist rotation here, not letting that band pull me kind of away from where my feet are going. That's really what we look at when we start to look at the transverse plane, is creating or resisting motion that dissociates the hips and the rib cage in this kind of rotational pattern. So there's just the end of kind of our overview of the different planes of motion, how we kind of can tackle some of those things, and really what it means to train within those planes.